The Doubt That Saves the Soul, Al-Ghazali's Hidden Gift. You begin by noticing how easily you say, "I am sure," about your views, your judgments, your way of seeing the world. Certainty feels stable. It gives a sense of completion. Once you are certain, you no longer have to look again. Al-Ghazali enters at exactly this point. He questioned whether certainty is the same as truth, or whether it is often the result of repetition and comfort. He observed that the mind can mistake what is familiar for what is real, and what is reassuring for what is accurate. You start to see that many of your strongest convictions were never truly tested. They were simply never disturbed. Doubt, from this perspective, is not an enemy of truth, but a question directed at the very feeling of certainty itself. If certainty feels like knowledge, how do you recognize knowledge that does not feel certain? To understand why Al-Ghazali valued doubt, you need to see the world in which he thought. He lived in an environment where different groups claimed exclusive access to truth. Theologians relied on inherited doctrines and authoritative texts. Philosophers relied on strict logical reasoning. Mystics relied on inner experience and states of consciousness. Each camp spoke with confidence. Each believed its method produced reliable knowledge. The result was not unity but a field of competing certainties. Each group regarded its own path as final and others as incomplete or misguided. Al-Ghazali did not begin by choosing a side. He began by examining the shared assumption underneath them all, that their particular method of knowing was beyond question. He asked whether any approach could claim certainty without first being tested. If every school is certain it is correct, what becomes of certainty itself? Al-Ghazali's inquiry led him into a crisis. He realized that the senses, which seem so immediate, can mislead. A straight object can appear bent in water. A distant sound can be mislocated. If the senses can deceive in some cases, how do you know they are not deceiving you in others you never detect? He then turned to reason. Philosophers used logical systems to construct complete views of reality. Yet different systems, each internally consistent, produced conflicting conclusions. Reason could justify multiple positions. If logic can support opposite claims, how can it serve as an absolute guide? Inherited beliefs offered stability, but he saw that their stability came from repetition, upbringing, and social agreement rather than from examination. You begin to recognize a similar pattern in your own life. Much of what you know has never truly been placed under scrutiny. When every source of knowledge can be doubted at its root, the mind is forced to confront its own vulnerability. If doubt exposes the weakness of knowledge, what exposes the weakness hidden inside doubt? You turn inward and look at how belief actually forms in you. You notice that ideas you have held for many years feel obvious. Their truth seems self-evident, not because you have proven them, but because you have lived with them for so long. They no longer appear as conclusions, they appear as facts. Al-Ghazali observed that the mind has a tendency to protect what it already holds. Once a belief is installed, new information is interpreted in a way that keeps the belief intact. Contradictory data is discounted, reinterpreted, or simply ignored. Certainty becomes less the result of investigation and more the product of habit. You see how this mechanism operates in your own thinking. It is easier to repeat what you already believe than to reopen a settled question. Habit preserves psychological comfort. Inquiry threatens it. The more familiar an idea is, the more it feels like truth. But if familiarity can create the sensation of truth, then that sensation is no longer a reliable indicator. If familiarity produces the feeling of truth, how do you recognize truth that arrives without familiarity? Al-Ghazali went further. He saw that beliefs do not only sit in the mind, they attach to the self. Over time, certain views become part of how you define who you are. You are not just someone who holds an opinion, You become someone whose identity is bound to that opinion. You notice this in yourself when a challenge to a belief feels like a challenge to you. Instead of examining the argument, you feel a subtle impulse to defend, reject, or counterattack. Reasoning becomes selective. You accept evidence that supports your self-image and find reasons to dismiss evidence that threatens it. Al-Ghazali understood that in such cases, argument is no longer a neutral search for truth. It becomes a tool for maintaining identity. The deepest obstacle to clarity is not lack of information, but the ego's need to preserve its story. You begin to ask a difficult question: how much of what you know is actually serving your need to remain the person you believe yourself to be? If your beliefs protect your identity, how do you discover beliefs that are free from identity? At this point, doubt takes on a new meaning. For Al-Ghazali, doubt was not a posture of destruction, but a method of purification. He used doubt to examine his own beliefs, not to annihilate them, but to separate what was based on evidence from what was based on habit, emotion, or identification. You begin to apply this discipline internally. When you encounter a belief you feel absolutely sure about, you ask, on what is this certainty built? Is it grounded in careful reasoning, clear experience, or simply repetition and social reinforcement? You notice how some convictions weaken when exposed to this question, while others remain stable. Doubt, in this sense, functions like a filter. It does not attack truth. It removes what only imitates truth. It reveals where desire, fear, or pride have influenced your acceptance of an idea. Gradually, what remains is fewer beliefs, but those beliefs are more honest. Yet there is a risk. Doubt itself can become a habit, a reflex that rejects everything indiscriminately. If doubt removes false certainty, what removes the false certainty hidden inside doubt? Al-Ghazali's inquiry did not end in negation. It led him to a more fundamental discovery. Beneath all your beliefs, beneath your doubts, beneath even your thoughts, there is awareness. Before you affirm or deny anything, you are aware. Before you accept or reject a claim, you are aware of the process. You can observe this directly. Right now, thoughts arise and pass. Opinions appear and fade. Certainties grow and collapse. Doubts intensify and soften. Through all of this, awareness remains. It does not argue. It does not prove itself. It does not need validation. It is simply present. Al-Ghazali recognized that this awareness cannot be doubted without using it. To question awareness, you must already be aware. To deny it, you must be aware of the denial. For him, this was the one certainty that doubt could not touch. It does not depend on reason, sensation, or tradition. It is prior to all of them. You realize that awareness is the unnoticed ground of everything you experience and think. It is the condition for knowledge, not an object of knowledge. If awareness makes all knowing possible, why does knowing fail to grasp awareness? Out of this insight emerges what Al-Ghazali regarded as a different kind of certainty. It is not the certainty produced by argument, demonstration, or social agreement. It is the certainty of direct recognition. Some truths are not concluded, they are seen. They do not need support because they are already self-evident at the level of awareness. You begin to distinguish between two modes of knowing. In one, you construct a chain of reasons and infer a conclusion. In the other, you simply recognize what cannot coherently be denied. The first is fragile, because it stands or falls with the argument. The second is stable, because it is grounded in immediate clarity. Al-Ghazali's hidden gift is this: doubt, when used properly, clears away the borrowed and habitual certainties that block access to direct recognition. What remains is a quieter, deeper assurance that does not rely on external validation. You see that the strongest certainty is not loud. It is simple. It does not insist. It just remains. If the highest truth requires no argument, why do you keep seeking argument to justify it? As direct recognition becomes more central, the ego's usual strategies begin to fail. The ego depends on argument, position, and difference. It wants to be right, to stand above, to feel superior through knowledge. When knowledge is seen as recognition rather than possession, this structure loses its support. Al-Ghazali understood that much of intellectual life is animated by subtle pride. The desire to win debates, to appear certain, to occupy an unassailable standpoint, all of this feeds the sense of self-importance. But when reason acknowledges its limits and truth is seen as something that reveals itself rather than something owned, the ego has less to cling to. You notice the shift as you become less interested in proving your correctness and more interested in seeing clearly. The urgency to defend views weakens. You are less threatened by the possibility of being wrong. Doubt has removed the illusion that your worth rests on your arguments. In that loosening, a different form of humility appears, not as an attitude, but as a consequence of seeing how limited the self-centered mind really is. If pride depends on argument to support itself, what remains when argument no longer defends you? With this reorientation, reason no longer appears as an enemy or as a god. It is neither rejected nor absolutized. Al-Ghazali placed reason in its proper place, as a powerful, necessary, but limited tool. Reason can analyze, compare, articulate, and refine. It can test consistency and expose contradiction. You begin to use reason differently. Instead of asking it to provide ultimate certainty, you ask it to clarify what can be clarified. Instead of demanding that it justify its own foundations, you allow it to operate within those foundations. Reason becomes more precise when it stops trying to exceed its scope. This balanced view does not weaken rational inquiry. It purifies it. It removes the demand that thought must anchor reality and allows thought to serve understanding rather than dominate it. If reason becomes trustworthy only when its limits are known, what or who shows you those limits? As the process unfolds, you notice a change in the quality of your knowing. It is less aggressive, less defensive, less dependent on being affirmed. Understanding begins to feel like a quiet alignment rather than a claim. You see something as true, but you do not feel compelled to assert it loudly. Al-Ghazali's journey suggests that this quiet knowing is a sign of purification. When knowledge no longer serves the ego, it stops needing to advertise itself. It stands by its own clarity. You recognize that the deepest insights do not shout. They simply remain available to any mind willing to look without distortion. In this quiet, the need to say, "I know," diminishes, while the capacity to see becomes more stable. If knowing does not require claiming, what becomes of the one who used to claim knowing? At the end of this path, doubt has completed its work. It has questioned inherited assumptions, exposed the habits of certainty, revealed the influence of identity, and guided you toward awareness as the one unshakable ground. Doubt no longer needs to attack, because there is nothing left to defend. Al-Ghazali's hidden gift is this transformation of doubt, from a force that destabilizes into a discipline that clarifies. What remains is not a final statement, but a state, a mind that no longer needs constant reassurance, a heart that no longer clings to its own constructions, an awareness that simply rests in what is evident. Truth, in this stillness, is not something you hold. It is something that does not move when everything else is questioned. If truth appears only when doubt becomes still, what remains for doubt to question?